So we're here today with Kent Brown. Kent, tell me where you went to high school, where you went to college, and when did you graduate?
Well, Tyler, I'm a proud 1981 graduate of Atwood Hammond High School, so Raja for life. That school's since closed and joined ranks with Arthur Lovington, so it's now Arthur Lovington Atwood Hammond. And I ended up at the University of Illinois, where I graduated with a journalism degree in 1987, and then a master's degree in athletics administration in 1989. And so it was during my journalism classes that I was directed, maybe because of my personality a little bit, that I just didn't know if I wanted to be a daily sports reporter, but I knew I wanted to work in sports. And so one of my instructors named Tom Kasich, who still writes part-time for the Champaign News-Gazette, suggested I go talk to the sports information office, and Tab Bennett was the SID at the time. And when I found out what they did there is the sports public relations, and the things they did with statistics and notes and working with the media were all things that I really enjoyed doing. A lot of that stuff I was doing on my own anyway. I was keeping stats, watching games, and keeping notes in my head about the last time and wondering all these things. And so the right career found me at that point in my life, and so I was able to become involved as a graduate assistant for 2 years.
When you applied for this job for the SID, what went through your mind that you were hired to go to Illinois, to go to Kansas State, and then come back to Illinois?
Well, when I was trying to get my foot in the door in this business, I knew it was something I wanted to do. At the time, Mike Pearson had just been named the head SID at the University of Illinois. He had taken over for Tab's role, and that happened to coincide when I was looking for a full-time job. And so Mike hired me full-time in the summer of 1989, and we were just coming off the Flying Illini Final Four, and I had traveled with the basketball team for the postseason and several games during the regular season. I got to know those guys really well, and so I had kind of proven myself with a lot of people within the athletics department. So had the opportunity to come in as a full-time assistant, work with many different sports, women's basketball, men's basketball, football, track, gymnastics, golf, baseball, a lot of different sports at that time. And so I was 7 years as a full-time assistant, and the summer of '96, I was starting to trying to figure out what I want to do long term. And so there were a few head SID jobs around the country, and I applied for a couple. And I was actually a finalist for the job at Akron in the MAC, and actually Kansas State called me. And so I did a little bit of research and found out that Kansas State, and I knew this, I mean, they had a great football program the year before. They had historically not been good, but the year before they'd finished in the top 10 in the nation, and they were looking for someone to come in and really help elevate their PR from a football standpoint. And so I was fortunate enough to be offered that position, and I went to Kansas State in 1996. And in the 4 years I was there working with Bill Snyder and the Wildcat football team, we won 42 football games and played in the Cotton Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl. Really had an incredible experience. Moved to #1 in the national rankings in 1998. We had a runner-up for the Heisman Trophy Award in 1998. A couple of guys who've gone on to be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. And so it was a really great period to be at Kansas State. When I left Illinois, I told Ron Gunther, who was the AD at the time, I said, I would love to be able to come back someday, but I know that there's no guarantees, and I know that you never know how things are going to work out in sports. And 4 years after I'd been at Kansas State, the SID at the time left and the job opened. And so they called me and asked me if I was interested in at least discussing it. And it was not as easy a decision as everybody might think, because I was in a really good spot in Manhattan. It was a great town for a small young family. I had two very young kids at the time, but Illinois was my school, and I grew up cheering for the Illini. Went to school here, two sets of parents within an hour of Champaign. it made for a pretty easy move to come back to Champaign-Urbana. And so in 2000, spring of 2000, I came back here and as the head SID, and which is a role that I had always really aspired to be when I got started in this business, and one that I knew that if that job ever opened when I was at Kansas State, there was a handful of jobs I would leave for. This was one of them, and so I had a chance to come back, and I was very fortunate to be able to do that. So, including my 2 years as a graduate assistant in the office, which is really a full-time position, it doesn't get paid full-time, but I was working on my master's degree. There was 9 years at Illinois, and so which gave me a great opportunity to really get to know a lot of the people in the community, a lot of people in the media that covered us. And so even the 4 years I was at Kansas State, it allowed me to still stay connected a little bit. I knew enough people and friends back here that I was staying connected. But my time at Kansas State, because I was in charge of the office and number one in running the football public relations, and Kansas State football, we were in the top 15 pretty much the entire time I was there, and in the top 10 a lot of the time. And so I got to know a lot of the national media even better during my time there. So once I came back here in 2000, where I've been where I finished my last 23 years of my 36 year in the business, that really helped me in terms of staying in contact with the national media, the people from ESPN, Sports Illustrated, the New York Times. I mean, I had everybody come through Manhattan at one time or another, so I got a chance to know all those people and continue those relationships, and brought those with me when I came back to Illinois. Now, when I came back, it was a time that I was back here about 3 weeks before Lon Kruger took the head coaching job with the Atlanta Hawks, and we hired Bill Self. And Bill also had incredible contacts in the basketball world, so that opened up another large area of people for me to get to know during Bill's time here. And so our football team also won a Big Ten championship in 2001, and basketball was at the top of the food chain. And so I was dealing with a lot of the national media over a pretty extended period of time from my days at Kansas State and at Illinois. And that's really helped. I mean, even through 2005, when our team went to the national championship game with Dee and Darren and that group, we were involved with the national folks on a really daily and weekly basis because of the success of our program.
When people hear SID, Sports Information Director, what exactly is your job role?
Well, traditionally the Sports Information Director is the publicity director for athletics, but it embodies a lot more than that. What we do is we're the records keepers for the athletics department. We're the publications coordinators for the department. Traditionally, we've been the photography coordinators, game day, media relations coordinators. We run the press box, the credentialing, the post-game press conferences, all those types of things. Whenever there's a crisis situation, and that can be a lot of different things. That could be a major injury, a firing, even a death of somebody that's close to the program, violations of some kind of crisis that that needs to be addressed with the public. The SID is usually involved with that and is oftentimes one of the spokespeople for those situations. And so those are some of the things that we do, and it's always ever moving, ever interesting job because of the different people you're dealing with, the different coaches, the different athletes, the different administrators, could be different media outlets, all those types of things changes on a day-to-day basis. So it can always be, there's always something new happening in our world.
Was there something about this job that you learned that you had no idea that you really would?
Well, early on, it was, I wasn't involved with the crisis situations as I was once I became the head SID of a department, and where the AD or the head coach was really counting on my counsel to help guide how we may respond to different things. Doesn't mean they would always take my advice, but they would always at least ask for my advice, and I would certainly give it, and oftentimes we would take that and maybe massage it a little bit to fit what we wanted to do. But there's so much, I think maybe the dealing with a lot of the general public on different requests that come through, because we're also not just media relations, but we're also oftentimes public relations, and dealing with it because we're kind of the front line for a lot of people. And so I've got to know so many people who we see each other at events and at games and banquets or luncheons or whatever all the time. And so over the time, I think maybe just all the different requests that we would get from pictures or videos or research or something about somebody's grandfather who played baseball here 75 years ago, or something of that magnitude that we help with as much as possible. And so I think after having finished my career, basically looking back, it's a lot of those types of situations that I've always kind of appreciated, maybe being able to help people answer some questions and gather information. Maybe there's no other way for them to get it.
How much has changed since you began to where you're at now and ending the career?
Technology has really forced much of the change along the way. When I first started, we would meet all day Sunday and type up a press release that we would include some football stats with, and it would be basically 2 pages typed on pages, and we'd copy it and stuff it in an envelope, seal the envelopes, and get them ready to go out Monday morning to the media, hoping that they would get it by Thursday before the next game on Saturday, right? That was a football weekly deal. And then as we went along, we found the fax machine came next. And so we were now able to instantly send information through the fax machine to different media outlets. But even all the fax machines weren't compatible. So sometimes we could send it, sometimes we couldn't. So that was even another thing. And then soon after that, it was desktop computers. And so all of a sudden we were able to really lay out and design our own pages, desktop publishing, that we were able to move along. So as we've gone along, the internet came next. And so now there's emails. And so as people were starting to pick up emails, we were able to really real time send information out on an immediate basis. And then we see the change in the media world. We see things like sports talk radio, which was never really 24 hours sports talk radio, which was happening in Chicago. That changed how people listened and engaged in the media world. And then as the internet continued to grow, our media not only covered, because you had a time schedule, you had this news cycle that would happen, and radio and TV were more immediate. Newspapers could go more in depth, but their deadlines weren't until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and so you could take all day to do stories. Well, that changed with the advent of the internet, because now things could be posted on the internet and could be updated immediately, and so there were no more deadlines about stuff. And so the next wave was social media, as MySpace and Facebook came into existence. MySpace you can't find anymore, but Facebook is still there, then Twitter, and then whatever else, so those became mainstays of how we disseminated information to our fans and to our public. So technology has driven a lot of the changes as we've gone through, which has required more resources, more staffing, more time. That means that all of a sudden, we're basically have to be available, because winter games and events, they're evenings and weekends anyway. And now with the advent of sports, social media, and as that continues to grow, really causes us to, we're on all the time. And so those are the biggest changes over the last 36 years.
What was your favorite part of the job?
Well, over time, as you meet the athletes and you get to know them, you get to know coaches, maybe a little bit more of a friendship level than just a professional level. It's both. I mean, you have to have a professional relationship, but also more of a personal relationship. You know, I've been very fortunate for over the last 36 years, except for that 4-year period. I got to witness some of the greatest Illini sports moments that ever existed, and got to know some of the greatest athletes and coaches who have come through here, and even some of the ones who were here before me. And so I think being a part of that, and being a part of the Illini family, and being able to be a part of that history is something I'll always be very proud of, and something I'll always take with me.
Some of the obstacles that you face the most, that it can be very challenging.
Well, part of our job as an SID is oftentimes to know everything, but not tell everything. And so there are lots of things that happen in our world in athletics that coaches, athletic directors maybe don't want to make public, and maybe that's injuries or suspensions or job changes or just things that are not positive towards the program. And so oftentimes, we're stuck in the middle a little bit of trying to have that relationship with our media, and yet realize that we work for the University of Illinois, we work for with our coaches and with our athletes, and that oftentimes we can't, even though we know some of the behind the scenes, behind what the stories are, and maybe some of the real truth behind that, those are things that we really can't discuss publicly. Could be legal problems, could be health issues, things like that we can't share with people. And so oftentimes, we run into those things. Maybe we disagree on what we can say and what we can't say with the coach or with the AD or with whatever. And so those are a little bit of the juggling act that oftentimes we have to play with in our jobs.
So you grew up an Illini fan. How do you handle being in charge of the media while trying to be professional and not being a fan?
Well, it's a bit of a conundrum every once in a while that you have to figure out how to do that, because obviously we're working with those teams and with those coaches, and we want success for them. And as someone who grew up as an Illini fan, I want success for the program. But I know our media's job, what their job is, and their job is to report on what happens, and that's good and bad. Losses and wins, bad stories, good stories, they have to report the stories. And so, you learn that early on that, we're kind of in the middle on that, and you just have to be able to set aside maybe your personal feelings and understand that you still have a job to do to make it happen. And so I think I've done that. I've been on some really tough losses. I mean, Final Four losses, championship game losses. At Kansas State, we lost a Big 12 championship game where if we win, we're in the first BCS championship football game. Really disappointing spots where no one wants to talk to the media. None of our players, coaches don't. And yet, I know that my job is to get somebody to them to get some comments or whatever we need to do, and yet be respectful for the people who you're working with, right? So it's a real balancing act. One that I feel like I've done a pretty good job at is I've taught myself oftentimes that it's hard for me to cheer. There's no cheering in the press box, and so I had to admonish a few media over the time to quiet their clapping or cheering or reaction to a play. But yet, when I go to games, I find it really hard for me to cheer. Even when my son and daughters have played sports, my friends around me always go, how do you sit there and not? I said, I've taught myself how to do this. It's hard for me to just cheer. I just can't do it. I just have to watch the game. It doesn't mean I'm not happy. It doesn't mean I'm not excited. It doesn't mean my stomach's not churning. It just means that that's just my profession that I chose, and it's kind of who I am in those situations.
Which sport would you rather be at, football or basketball?
Well, that's a great question. They both are super exciting at Illinois, and there's a lot of interest in both of those. Football pays the majority of the bills, the biggest crowds, television coverage, those types of things. You know, I grew up during an era in the 70s and 80s when basketball was really thriving as well, and I was probably more of a basketball player when I was growing up as well. So I'm probably would always lean towards being more of a basketball fan and the excitement around the basketball arena than maybe football.
What creates such an advantage for you, knowing that you have the knowledge for sports giving you that advantage?
Well, you know, when I was very young and I started collecting baseball cards, I basically memorized the back of everybody's card. And my family would, I was kind of like the family trick I was the entertainment at the family gatherings. They would take my baseball cards and they would cover everything but like the little corner of a guy's nose, and I could tell who it was, and I could tell all the stuff about the guy on the back. I became this traveling trick, right, roadshow, and so that it was pretty evident that. And then I started reading the newspaper. We had 2 daily newspapers, and so the News Gazette in Champaign, the Decatur Herald, and my parents and my grandparents would flip papers. So I read both sports pages every day from about age 8, 9, 10, all the way through. Every story. And so I remembered all the high school, all the kids who were good players, and I retained all that stuff. I read every book that I could buy through the school book program or at the library, you know, and I've still got most of them, and I memorized all the information on those things. So my head was full of this sports trivia. And then as I started working at Illinois, and especially when we were writing media guides and doing other things like that, those are all things that stayed with me. And so it's sometimes it's a skill, sometimes it's the bane of my existence is that's there, and I become sports trivia. That's why SIDs are really good at sports trivia. It's one of the DNA things that I think a lot of us have, is that ability to remember and retain sports information, and so being able to maybe pull on that and to get information quickly and remember information quickly has probably been an advantage more than once, many times over the years, when talking with our media or with a coach or with a fan, and remembering certain events or certain situations and who was involved and how it went down. Those are things that we do. And so there's a lot of people in the media who have that same type of skill set or memory. But it's one of those things that sometimes it can be sometimes a little bit of a burden to carry when you have all that information and you want to spout it out. You want to share it with everybody whenever you can. So is it an advantage? I think that's just part of the DNA of what an SID is. You know, when you've been in this for 36 years, there are many, many incredible experiences and moments that I've been able to be a part of. I can think back to watching Howard Griffith score 8 touchdowns in a football game to set the record, and going through the record books every time he'd score, trying to figure out where that stood in the standings of all-time touchdowns, and figuring out he set the record for all these things: scoring touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, all these things. You know, it's an incredible moment. Nick Anderson's buzzer beater shot at Indiana in 1989. I was sitting courtside, had an incredible view of it. One of the iconic moments in the history of our program. Andy Kaufman's basket at the end of the Iowa game in 1993 to defeat the Hawkeyes, when there was a lot of stuff going on between the two schools regarding Deion Thomas and the NCAA investigation, that sort of thing. A lot of emotion on the floor there. During my years at Kansas State, playing in a Big 12 championship game that was going to send us to the BCS championship game, we lost that, but still very memorable. Having a quarterback finish second in the Heisman Trophy, very memorable. Beating Nebraska in Manhattan for the first time in almost 30 years, incredibly memorable. What happened that day. Bill Self, working with Bill Self, very memorable. But I think the most memorable thing in 2005, the Illinois come from behind victory against Arizona in the regional final probably is my number one memory. And part of that is, that way that season unfolded, everything was falling in place for Illinois to get to the championship game. The first 2 games were in Indianapolis, drivable. The next 2 games were going to be in Chicago, Rosemont. Going to be a huge Illinois fan base there. And then the next 2 games, if we were to advance, were going to be in St. Louis. Again, drivable with access to Illinois fans. And so things were set up, just couldn't have been any better. And yet there we were down by 15 points, with 4 minutes to go, and it was not looking good. And Bruce Weber had already, I knew that he was going to be National Coach of the Year on several different fronts, and so we had already had plans to go to St. Louis. I'd planned to be there in St. Louis for those award ceremonies, regardless of the team, hoping the team would be there. But I had a room. As I'm sitting there going, well, this isn't work out. It's not how it's supposed to end. But this week I still have to go to St. Louis on Wednesday. There's awards on Thursday and Friday. These things I got to do. I'm starting to go through his mind. And then as the game unfolded very quickly with a couple of threes and another basket and a steal, and all of a sudden I realized that, wait a minute, this isn't quite over yet. And so where I was sitting, I had to walk down to get out from the middle of the press row to the end of the court. And so I watched the last probably minute from behind the photographers down on the end of the court, and then when Darren hit the shot to tie it, there were still 40-some seconds left in the game. There's still a lot of basketball to be played, but that may be the loudest noise I've ever heard at that point when he hit that shot. So it gets into overtime, and yet it still went down to the end. I mean, Arizona had to miss a shot at the end of the game, and it got to lose the game, and so we win in the celebration. And sitting in the green room, one of my clearest memories was sitting in the green room, which is the area, the space where you sit and wait for the press conference. Lute Olson was finishing up his press conference and talking about, you could tell in his voice how much that game hurt to lose it. And yet I'm sitting there with Dee and Darren and Luther and Jack. Those were the 4 players that we took to the press conference that day. And all of a sudden Darren just goes, what the hell just happened? And the players started kind of recounting how those last few minutes transpired. Dee says, I found the shit out of that guy. I just hacked the hell out of him. And Luther was like, I didn't know if I could make it to the end of the court. My leg was hurt so bad, and Darren's like, I couldn't believe that steal by Jack, that got us. They just started talking about the different plays and how it all happened, and to hear those guys, because they hadn't had really time to absorb it yet or really think about it, and it took this moment away from the court, just kind of in our small group. There was just 6 of us with Coach talking about it, and to hear them just feed off each other what happened and put it all back together was really something that I'll never forget. That was a moment I'll always remember.
Another gear. Can they do it with time running out? Arizona, Ingram to bat the ball away. Williams to tie it with a 3. He does! And all of a sudden, they are tied at 80. What an incredible crowd by Illinois.
So I know you mentioned some memorable players with D in that 05 team, but are there any more?
There's so many, it's hard to, I'll probably leave somebody out. But, at the beginning of my career, the Flying Illini with Kenny Battle and Nick Anderson and Lowell Hamilton and Kendall Gill and Stephen Bardo and Marcus Liberty and Larry Smith, that group, Irvin Small, that group was as close-knit and as competitive as anybody will ever be. And to watch them play, as athletic as they were, running up and down the floor, was incredible. Jeff George was our quarterback during that same period and had just an incredible arm and an ability to lead, especially at the college level. You never felt you were out of the game when Jeff was at quarterback. Howard Griffith with the 8 touchdowns. Simeon Rice Kevin Hardy, Dana Howard, John Holisek, all being linebackers at the same time was incredible. I mean, those guys, all four of those guys were just unbelievably talented linebackers, and to have them here at the same time. Mo Gardner just went into the College Football Hall of Fame a couple years ago. Watching him grow up, and still I consider him as one of the most mature athletes, college athletes I ever worked with, and that was 30-some years ago when I first met Mo. Deion Thomas and that group coming in through on the basketball side. When I came back to Illinois, Frank Williams was here, and Sergio and Marcus Griffin and that group. What a fun group to be around. Corey Bradford, still stay in contact with Corey quite a bit, and so Corey, watching him have 88 straight games with three-pointer, and that's a kind of a trivial thing, but it was an important streak, and it's really important for Corey during that time period to keep that going, and being a part of that was a lot of fun. The Kurt Kittner and that 2001 football team who won the Big Ten title out of nowhere. I mean, just really memorable group. And then a few years later, in 2007, that football team that with the upset win at Ohio State put them in a spot with Juice Williams and Jay Lehman, among many others, Mendenhall, to advance to the Rose Bowl, and how that all transpired, because we thought we were going to Florida, and then Ohio State slides into the national championship game, which opened up the Rose Bowl, and as a second place team gave us an opportunity to go to Pasadena. That 2005 team with D. Darren and James and Roger and Luther, what an incredible group to be around every day. The coaches like Bruce and Bill Self and Lou Tepper, Lou Henson is one of my all-time favorites. Ron Turner, Ron Zook was a guy's guy. It was fun to be around. Our current coaches are terrific, and Brad Underwood and Brett Bielema. Lovie Smith, the record did not end up where we all hoped and expected it to be, but I probably spent more time in Lovie's office talking about life than about football. And for the 5 years that he was here, I was in his office just about every day. And yet, our conversation would quickly move from whatever football issues to social events or where he grew up. And he grew up in a segregated small town in East Texas, and what he had to deal with as a youngster compared to what I had to deal with. I grew up in the middle of a cornfield in Hammond, Illinois, and it was it was completely white, right? And so we came up with two totally different backgrounds. And so to share stories about that and to learn about the things that he's experienced in life, and he would learn from me. I mean, he wanted to hear what I had to deal with, and so those are the type of things that I will always remember. These last few years in the basketball program, and watching Kofi and Io, Frazier, all those guys mature and really have a goal set forward, and to win at the level that they did, incredible. And so the length of list of people who I've had a chance to work with is something that I can't even start to put down, because there's too many. I know I've forgotten dozens and dozens over time. I'll tell you one of the most memorable things I ever did when Dick we were going to name our Hall of Fame. We're going to start our Athletics Hall of Fame, and so Dick Butkus was here on campus, and he was going to be our first member. We were going to name him. He was certainly going to be a member of the first class, and so Dick was here for the press conference that we announced it, and he approved or agreed to sit down with us and do a video interview. And so I'm the one who got to ask the question. So for about 40 minutes, I got to ask Dick Butkus whatever I wanted to ask him, right? And so I read his books when I was younger, and I knew a lot of this background. So I sat there and asked him just about anything I wanted to ask Dick Butkus for 40 minutes. It was incredible, right? I mean, it was still an unbelievable experience. And the things I found out about him, his sense of humor and his personality, and his acting career after he left the game, and was something that was really cool to be a part of. So those are all part of, you know, I took away a lot more than probably I ever gave to this business. Trust me, I was very fortunate to be a part of a lot of those things. Well, you know, it's interesting. Over time, you find out that basketball coaches probably have a little looser personality than football coaches. Football coaches are in charge of 120 players, 18 to 22-year-olds mostly, and all their staff. And so it's like a small army that they have to be in charge of. And so oftentimes, football coaches aren't quite as, I want to say, open and engaging. I will say this about Brett Bielema. He has a personality that allows him to talk to a lot of different people, a lot of different levels in one-on-one basis, and is always in the moment, and has a very unique way of doing that. And you can see why he's very good at recruiting. His personality is as close to Bill's self as I can remember. And Bill has the type of personality that can literally talk to anybody, a billionaire, a kid on the street, a farm couple, just a fan, a media person, and almost everybody who talks to him within 10 minutes will think that they're lifelong best friends with Bill Self. And Brett's very close to that. It's just a very unique skill that they have, and I learned a lot from watching how they interact and engage with people. Lou Henson was an absolute celebrity when I first met him. He'd already been coach here for many years and had celebrity status, and so I had a very good opportunity to get to know him more as I was in this business. And once I came back to Kansas State, and once he moved back from New Mexico and was around Champaign-Urbana a lot, I became a part of a regular lunch group with him that we still get together every Tuesday. Lou passed away obviously 3 years ago, but we still there's a group of us that were part of that we still get together, and to get to know Lou and Mary on such a friendly basis, a friend basis versus professional, was something that's very special to me. Bruce Weber is somebody that I probably respect as much as anybody I've ever met in the world because of his charm. He's just a very down-to-earth, true person, and who cares about people, and so I would never say anything poorly about Bruce. I've always been felt very good to get to know him. You know, Brad is another guy who is great to hang out with. He's very thoughtful of other people, and so very fortunate over time. The Illinois coaches, and it's, you know, not just football and basketball, but a lot of our coaches in the other sports are really good people. One of the great things about working at the University of Illinois is you get to work with some of the people who are the best at what they do in the entire world. You know, they are in the very top 1% in the entire world at coaching their position or their sport, and we get to be around them. They're very inspiring, and those are some that probably inspired me as much as anybody because of their personalities.
Funniest moment you've ever had on the job?
Well, as you can imagine, there's oftentimes things that happen at the moment you may not find really funny, but you might find them funny later. And I can tell you that probably the one that sticks out as much as anything was we were playing in the NCAA tournament, the first round of the NCAA tournament in Portland, and Chester Frazier had broken his hand and couldn't play, and we had lost a tough game to Western Kentucky. Late night. It was late at night, and so the rules of the NCAA tournament are that the media, it's open. The locker rooms are open to the media after a cooling off period. So, what happens? The team comes in, coach addresses the team. You get about 10 minutes. At that point, the meeting breaks up. The doors open, and the media have about 30 minutes with the people in the locker room. So we lose a really tough game. Everybody's down. We come in, and our media are gathering outside, the Champaign News-Gazette had hired a photographer from Portland to shoot the game for them, and they assigned him and said, you know, after the game, just go cover the locker room. Go to the locker room after the game. So I realized, you know, the game's over. Everybody's piling into the locker room. The team, the staff, the support staff, everybody's coming in. And while Coach Weber is addressing the team about how proud he is, how they stayed together, worked hard, you know, all the things that you say at the end of the season, all of a sudden our trainer, Al Martindale, looks over, and here's the photographer that the News Gazette hired sitting there, like shooting with his camera. He just goes, Coach, wait, what the hell's going on? Who are you? Who are you? And then Coach is like, what the hell? And the poor photographer had no idea, right? I mean, he was hired and just said, go to the locker room, and just went to the locker room and just followed everybody. He really didn't do it on purpose, but all of a sudden, all eyes are on this guy, and he's feeling about this tall, and immediately, so then they turn to me, right? Because I'm the SID. What the hell are they doing here? So I said, come on, man, let's get out of here. So we escort him back out, and he's apologizing profusely. He goes, they just told me to come to the locker room after the game, just cover the locker room. I said, I get it, okay. The doors will be open. It'll be open to the media here in a few minutes when it's all done. And so for a few moments there, it was a little tense. But after everybody had a chance to take a breath and realize it was an honest mistake, we all could kind of laugh about it. And we talked about it later. And even years later, we talked about that moment. And even the players were like, God, I couldn't believe what this guy was doing there. You know? And so that was one of those things that just kind of happens.